Welcome to the Wednesday night Hump Day Hangar presentation brought to you by supercub.org and the Not So Straight and Level podcast. Let me make sure I've done all the little housekeeping things I need to do. I see that I'm missing one already, which I'm going to do. Bingo, bingo, that's done. And should be in good shape. So if you were around last week to watch the supercub.org world update, you will know that we had a major crash of the internet right in the middle of it. Well, the internet actually completely quit for 3 hours, so it's a good thing we just didn't hang around and try to do it. So the jury is still out on whether or not I should do the second half of that program, where all the really juicy stuff is, or if I should just let sleeping dogs lie. We'll wait and see. Next week, we're doing something a little different. We're not going to be holding our own Hump Day Hangar presentation. Instead, we're going to tell folks about Dr. Randy Korfman's program on drug interactions that he's doing for the FAA. So that'll be just around the same time on next Wednesday evening. This will have its own little registration, and we're going to send out the details about how to get onto that in a few days. I've been hard at work on the calendar and some other things, doing a lot of flying down in the Ozarks. Lots of folks have been coming down there to visit us since they saw the program that Dave and Chip did on the Airfield Guide and flying the Ozarks recently. So we hope you'll find some time to get down there as well, too. The flying has been very good. So tonight's presenter, Bill McGlynn, finished a 30-year career in the computer industry so he could pursue his true interest, backcountry flying. A famed Idaho aviator, Jim Larkin, took Bill into one of his favorite places in Idaho, Moose Creek, and Bill has been going back there every year since. In fact, you might find him there at the ranger station if you visit Moose Creek. He volunteers a month a year there to help keep the place up. Bill joined the Idaho Aviation Association when he started flying in 1995 and became active in the RAF in 2011. He became a member of the board in 2016 and was elected RAF President in 2018. He's passionate about the mission to save these airfields from extinction. Bill and his wife Julie now live in Leavenworth, Washington, just a few miles down the road from their grandkids. Welcome, Bill McGlynn.
Hey, Steve. Good to see you again. Hey, I like your hat.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got the right brand on there. I put together a little bit of a presentation just because I thought it would be simpler after trying to go through some of this with Steve. Skipping all over my computer trying to get photos to look the right way and everything, and it wasn't turning out so well. So I decided to put it into a presentation. And if it bounces around a titch, it's because it's not a very well rehearsed presentation on my part. Anyway, I was going to give you an update on the RAF. I mean, I would guess that most of you are supporters of the RAF in some form or fashion, and many of you may be integrally involved. In fact, Bill Bryan is on the board of the RAF. Steve Johnson could actually give this presentation because he was on the board of the RAF for 5 years, and Laura was the brains in the organization. I'm just kidding, Steve. I'm just kidding. Laura did participate a lot. Good to see you, Laura. Anyway, the RAF's been around now for about 17 years, and it's kind of amazing how how it's become. I think we say the third largest pilot organization in the nation, or something like that. Don't know if that's entirely true, but we like to say that anyway. The mission has stayed the same from the beginning in 2003, and that's to preserve and maintain and even create some of these places that we like to go visit. And so John McKenna always was the one that would say, well, there's AOPA, which is all about the pilot. There's EAA, which is all about the airplane. And then there's the RAF, which is all about where you're going to take those pilots and airplanes. And so, the fundamental of the organization has been the same from that first night that they sat around a fire in Montana and said, man, we got to do something because these places are starting to disappear, and whatever we're doing at the state level isn't working all that well anymore. And so they came up with some ideas of showing up at all the Forest Service meetings, and then somebody came up with the idea of coming into the room with an orange shirt that looked like Steve's there. except for he's wearing the Italian racing version of the orange shirt. And lo and behold, a lot of the Forest Service people started saying, who are those people in those orange shirts anyway? And it became kind of a logo element, if you will, that the guys in the orange shirts are always the pilots. And the effort was a good effort, but it honestly wasn't enough. And sooner or later, John McKenna and a bunch of others started going to Washington, D.C. with the help of some friends. Mark Baker has always been a strong supporter, but before him, there have been, even Phil Boyer was somewhat of a strong supporter, but Craig Fuller was probably the most adamant. And then some friends in the general aviation community who are also in this photograph in the upper right, people that kind of helped us, if you will, get connected to the powers that be at the federal level, which really made a difference for us, because it started giving us traction that we needed to be a national organization rather than just a state organization, and kind of, it helped our efforts emerge, if you will, and look larger than real life. So in 2020 now, we're active in all 50 states. We have 9,000 plus members. And we actually don't have members. We're not a membership organization. So you don't like join the RRF and pay your dues every year. We have supporters. We love it when supporters give us money every year, but we aren't organized legally as a membership organization. And the way we structure our efforts is we have state liaisons. And Dave Powell, who's on this call, Dave is one of our state liaisons. He's in Arkansas. And Dave plays a vital role, and I'll bring him up again in a few minutes. He plays a vital role in Arkansas in many ways. But 53 state liaisons mean we obviously have multiple state liaisons in some states. We have about 43 states, I think, represented. So 7 that we don't have representation in. But these liaisons play a key role at the local level. And then we also have another title, or another part of our structure are somebody that we call ambassadors. These are people who maybe don't want to commit as much time as a state liaison, or they don't feel that they're necessarily qualified to be a state liaison, but they want to get active and they want to start doing things and playing a role. And these people are great, and they're all over the United States. We have 46 of them now, and hopefully more. And we're now officially titled as a 501c3, which does give us the benefit of being a tax exempt organization. So any donations that are made to us, et cetera. It also comes with some burden, but those are burdens that we can bear, since pretty much 97% or 97 cents of any dollar that we get goes directly to some airfield somewhere. And that's the way we like to keep it. We like to drain the bank account almost every year if we possibly can, and putting it toward airfields. And I'm going to tell you about some of those, because the 3 things I wanted to brief you on tonight was work that we've been doing with the U.S. Forest Service and the BLM. And these obviously are huge organizations, but they also have responsibility for a huge amount of land. I think it's something like 90 million acres or something is the total of what the Forest Service and the BLM manage in public lands in the West. Obviously, that's not everything, because there's very little public land east of the Mississippi River, although there are a couple forest regions out there, which you kind of wonder what they do. But we have efforts in the Northeast and in the eastern part of the United States. In fact, our largest base of supporters is in Florida, thanks to a guy named Tim Clifford, who showed up with a clipboard and did a really good job of signing up a whole bunch of people way back. I'm also going to talk about the Airfield Guide just for a couple of minutes, because we think it's strategically important to recreational aviation, but also to the RAF. And we've had a great relationship there, I think, for 3 years now with Chip Givens and the Tailwinds organization. And so I'll talk about that for a few minutes and what we have in mind for that. And then I want to bring you up to speed on some work that we've done at Ryan Field, which is 2MT1 in Montana. Ryan Field is the only field that we've actually had donated to us. So but it's something that we're very interested in doing in the future, is, making it possible for airfield owners to donate their property, especially if it has recreational value, donate their airstrip and be able to take the tax advantages of doing that at the right time. So at any rate, moving forward, I'll talk a little bit about the Forest Service, but the Forest Service isn't the only public agency that we have a partnership with. We also have the BLM, as I mentioned earlier, but also the National Park Service. I think we have the only relationship with the National Park Service where we have actually responsibility for the chicken airstrip in Death Valley National Park. Great relationship there, mostly because of state liaison Rick Locke, who operates out of the Kern Valley Airport. He has just been just a tireless volunteer in working on that airstrip, and the supervisor of the Death Valley National Park admires the work that he's done, and it's pretty amazing. Oh, thank you, John. John just sent me a message that said 193 million acres is managed by the U.S. Forest Service. I was a little short there. And 245 million acres are managed by the BLM. So it's a huge, huge number. A lot of people are surprised when they find out that we actually have a partnership agreement with the Nature Conservancy, because they usually would think that those two things don't go together, airplanes and the Nature Conservancy. It happens to be in Arkansas. That's where it started, at least. And it's been interesting to talk to Scott Simon about why he thinks we're a good fit with one another. And, his concerns are, when you start developing roads into some of these places that they try to conserve, the road becomes actually part of the problem, not part of the solution. All kinds of sediment, results comes as a result of developing these roads through these properties. We put an airstrip in, we seed it with grass, and the grass grows and we mow it. And in the space of maybe a mile of grass airstrip, we can come and go and enjoy that backcountry in ways that would cost the Nature Conservancy a fortune in developing roads. So he said, you guys are all about conserving the land, conserving the airfields that provide people access to nature. That fits with our charter. And so we have a very good relationship with them. And we're looking forward to broadening that out to other states. In fact, we're working on a relationship right now in Maine with the Nature Conservancy and an airstrip that they had donated to them by international paper. So at any rate, long story short, the Forest Service obviously was one that, when John McKenna and the 5 other founders of the RAF got together, they were most concerned about the Forest Service closing airstrips. So they knew that they had to start, spending more and more time getting into the Forest Service at all levels, from the forest ranger all the way up to the chief of the Forest Service, to try to start to understand how we could better collaborate with them. And on many of those trips, John would obviously, spend some time with the Forest Service, but then he would also spend some time, and he's got some great friends at the Forest Service. He would also spend some time with the congressional representation for the different Western states, obviously with Montana representative, but then also with Idaho representative, and got to know their staffs fairly well. And it turned out that through a member of the staff for a guy named Mike Simpson, who's a congressman in Idaho, and he's been there for a long time, probably 20 years at least. John got invited to come and give testimony to the House Appropriations Subcommittee on the Interior. And so John, I think he got 5 minutes, but he only used up 4, and he gave him a minute back, which they always appreciate. And he just basically made a pitch for, why we need to conserve these airstrips and protect these airstrips on these public lands in the forests. The presentation went down very well. Mike Simpson, who is a pilot, he doesn't fly anymore, but he was a fairly active pilot while he was still practicing as a dentist. Mike Simpson said it always gave him some solace when he was flying over Idaho to be able to look down from his Cherokee 235 and see an airstrip down there in case something were to go wrong. He said, I'm all in favor of conserving these places and taking care of them. Let's see what we can't do in the budget. As it turned out, he couldn't do much in the budget. It just didn't work out that particular year. But one of the guys that actually worked the numbers for the Congress, for the Congressional Budget Office, he kind of took some pity on us as the RAF, thinking, those poor guys, they're working hard to try to save these places. And I heard their impassioned plea, and I admire, what they're doing and their commitment to volunteering. So I'm just going to find some budget dust in here that I'll put into the budget, and we'll earmark it basically for maintenance on airstrips on Forest Service lands. That's what he did. The next thing you know, out comes the budget for the Forest Service, and it's got $750,000 in it, allocated specifically to airstrips on Forest Service lands. That first year that it came down, the Forest Service was totally confused, didn't know what to do with the money. Like, where'd this come from? Did somebody request this? We've got some hooks in here that we have to report back to Congress how we use this money, so we got to take it seriously. And some of my friends in the Forest Service said it was pretty hysterical listening to some of the conversations about who actually has responsibility for airstrips. Is it the fire guys or is it the recreation guys? So it took one whole year for them to sort that out. No money got spent, no projects got accomplished, nothing really happened. The next year, however, it was like 2017, they started saying, okay, so this is obviously something that's not going to go away, because here it is again. Every year, John put in more effort with the congressional aides to be able to say, hey, can we have that money back again this year? Oh yeah, it's in the management. It's in the management memo of some of the money that's being carved out specifically within the Forest Service budget. So the next year, the Forest Service, the different forests got a little more serious and said, what are we supposed to do with this money? Who is actually going to be responsible for it? And how are we going to make this work? Some forests really dove in with both feet and started to take this really seriously. Luckily for us, a couple of them in Idaho that have a lot of airstrips were some of the ones that took it very seriously. Some of the others continued to say, we're not exactly sure, how we're supposed to be using this money. We were not organized, to put these projects together. But now we're on year 4. And I'll tell you, this past year, even with the COVID problem and everything else that's been going on, we've been inspired by some of the things that we've seen happen. And some of you guys have been to some of these places like Moose Creek, and Dave Powell was there not all that long ago. And guess what? The approach end of the short runway at Moose Creek has been cleared of all the trees. They cut down about 20 trees. Now, if we go and volunteer at a place like Moose Creek, Idaho, One Uniform One, we paint rocks, we put up new windsocks. We don't cut down trees, we don't even move, we don't even get the chance to remove brush, in a lot of cases. So, I mean, these guys come in and it's usually a fire crew that comes in and they have something in their mind and they go in and they start doing their work. And in fact, I have a video that I was going to show to everybody, which doesn't work very well on Zoom, unfortunately. But Steve has committed to send you a link to it. I'm
gonna send the link in the chat.
Perfect.
So you can get it out of the chat. I'm also gonna put it on the YouTube chat. Now, just remember, if you click it, it might go flying. You might fly off your screen. So, but grab it and look at it later, because it's really pretty cool. And you can kind of tell them what you're trying to show there in the video, Bill. Yeah. But it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, the video winds up being really choppy and almost unrecognizable because of the way that the way it comes out. But the cool thing about this video is this is a Forest Service 206 that has a 360 camera mounted on it, so you can look at the camera from all different directions. or look at the camera view from all different directions. This just happens to be one of the clips out of the video. And you can see here on the left, these are all trees that have been removed from the approach end of this airstrip at Cayuse Creek in Idaho. We didn't ask them to remove those trees. Their pilot flew in the 206 and said, well, it'd be nice if we removed all of these trees because these are in the way. And obviously you got to get over those trees to get to the airstrip. The airstrip's plenty long. But once you clear those trees, you know, you got to have a super cover, something to be feeling really good about it. The other part of it, and John McKenna got a call from a guy in Missoula one day and said, why don't you guys do something about that Cayuse airstrip? And it's like, what's the problem? He said, well, it's got, you know, hoof marks all over in it from them letting stock wander around on a muddy airfield, and it's really in bad repair. So the Forest Service with this 206 flew in one of these plastic rollers that you can fill with, I don't know how many gallons of water. I don't know how much the thing weighs. They pull it with a couple mules and up and down the airstrip. And you'll notice in this video, if you just look at the nose gear on that airplane, as he starts to make his takeoff roll, that airstrip is about as smooth as you can get a backcountry airstrip at this point. And by the way, this airstrip is listed as emergency use only. And so this isn't one of the prime airstrips, but it just shows you some of the progress that we're making with the Forest Service. And like I said, I wish this would happen in every single region with every single forest. But you know, perseverance is is the name of this game. So we just keep working and working and working to try to, you know, get where we want to be with the Forest Service on these airstrips. But they have so many of them, it's well worth our effort. I did mention the BLM. The relationship with the BLM is really phenomenal. The BLM's attitude with airplanes is, well, why don't you first of all tell us where all these airstrips are, because we don't even know. And secondly, if there are airstrips out there, we'd really like to know about it because we'd like to tell people where they are. And if you want to land out there, feel free. You know, I mean, it's not private property, it's public property. And so they're anxious for us to work with them. At the same time, they've paid no attention to aviation on their land in the past probably 20 years. And more than anything, they need to be informed of what they actually have. And that's a big, big job, but it's one that we're also committed, you know, to work on with them. I told you I was going to talk about the Airfield Guide, and I'll tell you what, Dave Powell is a hero in our world. Dave collects up all this information, and I don't know how you guys actually had a presentation about the Airfield Guide, so I don't think I need to go into a ton of detail about it. But, you know, if we have all of these wonderful airstrips, you know, on either BLM, Forest Service, or private land, it's one of the best kept secrets unless we have some way of letting people know where these places are and what kind of condition they're in, and some advice on how to get in and out of these places safely. And that's what the Airfield Guide actually provides. And I think it was about 3 years ago, maybe it was 4, that Chip Gibbons came and said, hey, you know, could we collaborate on this? Because I can put the program together and make the program work, but man, I don't have the people to collect up all the data about all these airstrips and, you know, put it into a database. I can make the database presentable and make it easy to use, but man, having the people that actually pull all this stuff together is a big chore. That's the chore that we took on. So we have, like I said, 53 state liaisons, and part of their responsibility is to go out and find these airfields, you know, and send the information to Dave. And like I said, Dave's our hero because Dave goes back and forth with these guys and, you know, digs up information on these places so that we can give everybody the detail that they need as far as how to approach the airstrip, how to land there, what's uphill, what's downhill, what's prevailing winds, left or right pattern, all of that information. Dave puts it into the database, and voila, it pops up, as one of these dots. And we just crossed the threshold of 250. And I think we're picking up speed. If Dave could say so, I think he's doing about 5 a week, maybe more. So we're making really good progress on the Airfield Guide. What we'd like to do is make this, because right now, as you probably know, the Airfield Guide is web-based. It doesn't look very good on an iPhone if you try to bring this information up on an iPhone or a mobile platform at all. And so one of the things we'd like to do is to have some kind of a gateway to a mobile platform that you'd be able to download this information, carry it with you, get updates on it as you need. And so, if you're traveling from one place to another, you don't need an internet connection to be able to get the details on whatever airstrip you might be passing over. That's the goal. And hopefully we're going to get that done in the next year or two. I'm happy to take some questions on the Airfield Guide too, if we get there. I know.
Yeah, I've got, folks, just so you know, there's a chat function in Zoom, or you can use the chat on YouTube. Feel free to ask questions on there as we go along, and we can pick them up as appropriate, or we'll stop at the end and give some chance for some questions for you as well too, Bill.
Sounds good. Some of you have probably been to Ryan Field, Montana. Ryan Field is 2MT1. It's about maybe 2 miles from the entrance to Glacier National Park. It's a beautiful location. The airfield was donated to us by Ben and Butch Ryan, and I'm going to show you pictures of them in just a minute. It's a beautiful place to be able to bring your family. Ben and Butch turned out didn't have any kids. They were really committed to this airfield and wanted it to remain, indefinitely. And there's a picture of Ben and Butch on the right-hand side standing next to Mike Todd and his Silver Bullet. It's a beautiful place. And there's no doubt why Ben and Butch chose this place to be the place that they called home. They were there for more than 40 years. Ben was a geologist with Richfield Oil Company, and made enough money doing that he was able then to buy this homestead, 163 acres in Montana. They didn't have any kids, as I mentioned, and so one of the things that Ben had to think about as they got older was, what are we going to do with this place when we're not around anymore? So Ben called the city of Kalispell and said, hey, would you guys have any interest in this property if I donated it to you at some point? And the city of Kalispell said, maybe, but we can't guarantee that we would keep it. We'd probably sell it for improvements to the Kalispell airport. Ben didn't feel so good about that. So Ben was talking about this with a friend of his, and the friend said, hey, you ought to call the RAF and talk to them about it. And Ben, said, who's the RAF? And he said, well, I'll give you the guy's name. His name is John McKenna. He's up in Bozeman. You should just have a discussion with him. So Ben called John, and John, very politely, said, well, maybe I'll just come up and land at your airfield and we could talk about it, Ben. And Ben said, that'd be great. So Ben and John walked around the property and took a look at everything. And Ben kind of asked, what's the RAF all about? And we said, well, we're trying to preserve these places and take care of them. And we're even trying to create some, like Russian Flat in Montana. And we, our whole thing is to make these beautiful places available to pilots. And Ben said, yeah, that's good enough for me. So he said, when we pass on, we're going to give you this place. And all we ask is that you keep it open and that you make it a great place for people to go with their families and whoever else on, in an airplane. And so that's been the goal ever since, is to take this place and make it even better if we can. And so, it was very clear that the homestead was falling down. Ben and Butch's house. Ben passed away, by the way, in 2017, and his wife Butch is in a VA home in Montana. But it was very clear that the homestead, was just basically coming apart after 40 plus years and very little maintenance in the last 10. So we said, what could we do here that would be really cool? And it was like, what if we remove the homestead and all the outbuildings and everything else? What would we do? And John McKenna called our former president of the RAF, Alan Metzler, and said, Alan, so we got this beautiful new John Deere tractor that got donated to us to mow the lawn up at Ryan Field. What should we build to, put it in? And he said, well, being in Pennsylvania, he said, I would talk to an Amish community and ask them if they could build you a barn. And so John checked around, found out there was an Amish community in Townsend, Montana, and said, do you guys build barns? Lo and behold, sure enough, they build barns. So we asked them for a bid, and we started to raise money. And they said, yeah, we'd be happy to put up a post and beam barn for you. And they did that in 5 days, put the structure up. And obviously it wasn't done, but the rest was done by volunteers, and just some incredible work that was done, which I'll go into more in just a second. But you can see in this photo, especially on the lower photo on the right-hand side there, you can see the runway, and the runway basically faces pretty much north, and that's Glacier Park up there to the just beyond that mountain. Beautiful spot. Turns out Ben was a veteran of World War II. He flew P-38s in the Pacific. And we thought, what a better testament to Ben than a missing man formation of P-38s in the floor of the barn. And so that's what this is a picture of, the missing man, a P-38 formation in the floor of the barn that was donated to us by Pete Smith, who has a company that does metal work in Lewistown, Montana. And you can see the RAF logo also is right there in the doorway in stainless steel embedded in the floor. It's going to be a great place for people to come and spend time, but it's also going to have some amenities like 2 hot showers, flush toilets, a good place to park our John Deere tractor in the winter, and they do have winter. It will be a nice warm place to get in out of the rain when you go there to visit. We also, besides doing that, we put in a couple of small cabins, 12 by 12 foot cabins that don't have any power or light or anything or heat, but a good place to sleep in case you don't feel comfortable bringing your tent. The most impressive part about this project has been the volunteers. John and Mike Perkins, who are on the right-hand side there, John's on the left, Mike Perkins is in the middle. These two guys have really done an amazing amount of volunteer work. Show up there all the time. John spent, I think, 18 days in a row there organizing the efforts. I think 30 plus volunteers came and went, doing all of the things that you can imagine, putting up wood, putting up siding, finishing the roof with metal roofing. All of that was done, basically by volunteers. Ruben, who's in this picture on the left, in the center, he's kind of the key guy for the Amish community. He's the guy that puts these barns up, engineers them, and then puts them up. And he's probably the only paid guy out of that group that you see. And I really enjoyed a summary that Mike Todd put together that he posted on Facebook. And I'll read it for you in case you can't see it. He says, for the last week, I was the trim guy, getting the J metal and drip edge ready for the crews to install the corrugated siding. The sound outside my hearing protection was that of measurements called from ladders to the guys cutting metal to fit the big pieces of metal around purlins and beams and windows and doors, saws cutting steels, drivers driving screws, and calls for me to climb down from the ladder and help boost the sheets in place. The crews doing the work were surgeons, airline pilots, accountants, business people, an air traffic controller, a writer, some retired, some working, all in love with airplanes, aviation, and the backcountry. And that pretty much sums up the Recreational Aviation Foundation. I don't think anybody could say that any better. So that's been our latest project. It's been a real project of love, but probably the most amazing thing about it has been the camaraderie of all of these volunteers who spend hours and hours and hours doing agonizing work. And it has Ron Normando said, who's one of our volunteers in Montana, he said, I haven't worked this hard in 30 years since I was a smoke jumper. And he said, and I haven't had as much fun in probably 10 years. And so it just goes to show, what's possible when you get a vision for a project like this. We would love to do this all over the United States, not necessarily build barns, but improve these places so that they become real destinations and someplace that, the aviation community can really enjoy. This for right now is our emblematic airfield. Great picture of Carmen Mowbray, and I think that's at Meadow Creek, but I'm not positive. But thank you for the time and your attention. And we're just coming up on the hour, and I think Steve said we were going to open it up for some questions in case there were some. Or comments.
If anybody has any questions or comments, you can either shoot them in the chat if you like. I got a couple of Dave Powell. Do you have anything you'd like to say further about the Airfield guide?
Oh, I would add Chip's been the instrumental guy that when I can't make it work, he delves into what the issue is and fixes it. So I appreciate that a ton. I would agree with you, Bill. In the last 2 weeks, I've probably gotten 6 or 7 airstrips a weekend from some of the new liaisons in different states. And it's really fun to put them in. I kind of get the first view of a new airstrip that can kind of make the next summer dreams come true if I get to make it to all those areas. But there's a lot of great strips in that program, and a great way to sort it out and decide where you'd like to go and visit.
Man, that would be something, Dave. Go hit every one of those airstrips.
Yeah. And why I think it shows we have close to 300 strips, 270 or 80. We probably got about 80 or so in the draft stage that we're working on that aren't yet ready to publish. So we're well over 300 in the database. They're not all visible right now.
Well, kudos to you, because I know from talking to state liaisons, they say they would never be able to do this unless you intervened and helped them out, because some of the detail is beyond their ability, and you fill the gap. So thank you.
I appreciate it.
Got a couple other questions here, Bill. A question from YouTube: any updates on the ragmuff and red pine strips in Maine?
Oh yeah, red pine was the one I was talking about with the Nature Conservancy. There've been some board member changes, and unfortunately, when that happens, like in the Nature Conservancy of Maine, we start over a little bit. But Andy Rowe has been convicted of this, as has Steve Mason, and they say they're just going to continue to work. They've been working this for 10 years, so obviously you don't rush through any of these things. But I don't know anything about ragmuff. Honestly, I only know Bill Bryan might know something about ragmuff. But I only know about red pine, and we haven't given up. We're still working it.
Bill Bryan, you want to talk about ragmuff? Do you know anything about it?
Yeah, I know nothing about it. No, I think ragmuff might be gone, but not sure.
Thank you. So when somebody asked Bill, how can they volunteer to help with the Nature Conservancy strip in Maine? What kind of help do you need up there?
Andy Rowe is the right guy to answer that. Sometimes too many cooks is a problem. I think right now it would probably just let him know, and we can get you that address, arowe@theraf.org, ROWE. Let him know that, hey, you're available, you're happy to help out. And by the way, if you happen to know people, in the Nature Conservancy there, that could be a big aid. But we just need to, by the way, Scott Simon has played a role in Arkansas, who's the Nature Conservancy director for Arkansas. he's trying to make the Maine people feel more comfortable that obviously we've got a great relationship on Trigger Gap in Arkansas. We could do that again in Maine. Like I said, some of the players have changed on the Nature Conservancy Board. So now I think we just basically have to get people feeling comfortable. There's an insurance issue there that we think we kind of got past, that we got resolved, was one of the obstacles, but we're going to keep pushing it.
Seems like from the chat that there's some discrepancy about what's going on with Rag Muff, so maybe we'll look into that further and find out what else is going on. So, anybody else have any questions for Bill? Anybody? Here's a question, which actually was a good question, because I was going to ask it. Are the cabins at Ryan available to reserve? Are they first come, first served? Do you rent them? How is that going to work?
You know, we decided we're not going to rent them, just because that is kind of a pain. What we're going to ask for is a nice donation, whatever you feel like is the right amount. They're first come, first serve. We're asking people not to stay there all summer. Not that you would want to do that, but there's a courtesy car, so you are able to get into town and stuff. So we're still trying to. We don't want to have signs all over that say "Do not do this" and "You can't do that." And no, 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 no. We want it to be something where people feel very welcome to come. That's obviously a difficult thing to do because there's always problems, but we'll address those problems when they come along. They'll be. We believe that they'll be in the in the minority. But anyway, right now, if you're lucky enough, you pull in there, taxi in, and tie down your airplane, and there's nobody in one of those cabins, you can take it.
Very nice.
They're not open yet, by the way.
Are they going to be open for the next season? Is that the plan? Or?
Yep, next season.
Very good. Well, Bill, thank you so much for your time this evening and for the update.
Thanks for the invite, Steve. This has been fun.
You bet. I'd like you to consider putting this on the quarterly agenda or something for you guys, because just gives another little group of folks that you can reach. And folks, if you're not an RAF member and hearing this doesn't convince you that it's definitely a great organization to help support, then I don't know what's wrong with you. So.
we live on your support. So yeah, if you happen to have a few spare dollars left at the end of the year, send them our way. We'll put them to good use. We promise.
Thanks again, Bill.